intimate. This is the first of our highlight sessions, so we're going to get into the weeds. I want to start with the really raw version of how Seed and Sprout started. Tell me more.
Sure. So our founder is here today, Sophie Kovic, who's currently filming me. Sophie is still a mother of a small child, growing up in Byron Bay in the Northern Rivers, and like any great founder, when she couldn't find a plastic-free lunchbox, she went out and she built the damn thing herself. So that's a scrappy kind of story of how we started. From there was a Kickstarter campaign, and it went from Sophie's garage with her mum and friends and family to where we are today, 9 years later, and quite a big little business.
Amazing. So we've got some of your product here, and we will be taking questions at the end with little product to give out as a little bonus. So get those questions firing in your mind. Before we do, tell us about your customer. Who are they? What do they care about when they're buying this product from you?
I think our customer has evolved over the years. So I think originally it was probably people who were very, very much into doing good for the planet and being very hardcore in the sustainability space. So our DNA hasn't changed, but I think our customers have changed over the years. So Sophie was onto something really early in the piece. So 10 years ago, not many people were talking about the environment. And we heard that as the kickoff and the welcome to country, our Earth is really in a difficult space at the moment. And so I think it's become more socially acceptable to talk about environmental issues, and not in a negative way, but what can we do about it? And our customers are really in 3 different segments. So we have our environmentalist customer, definitely. We also have this new emerging customer around wellness and health and well-being. So if anybody's been on Netflix recently and watched a very horrific documentary about what microplastics is doing to your body, you'll probably be on this train already. If not, that's some homework for you on the plane ride home, is to watch that documentary and take that in. So the wellness customer. And then we have the customer who appreciates our 2 very, very talented product designers, and they're for the aesthetics. They're there for the, oh my gosh, someone's made a solution to the problem that I have. So some of our customers span all 3 of those, but quite often they're just one little hint for each of them. So.
And when a customer is starting with your brand and they're trying your product for the first time, are they dipping into a certain category? Like, what are they trying? Where are they starting?
Yeah, so I think this probably dives a little bit into our history and our DNA as well. So we started as a lunchbox company, so plastic-free stainless steel. And today we span lots of categories, from beauty to cleaning to kitchen to travel. I've probably missed some of them, composting. We only sell our own products and we only design our own products, and so we're quite unique in that space. So people might come in on a compost bin. For those in the room that are playing along, you may not be aware, but this is one of my favourite weeks of the year, and not just because it's Retail Fest, but because it is Compost Awareness Week. So it is important. It's something that you can do quite easily, and we're also supporting a charity in the Solomon Islands. And Kate, I always forget the name, so it is Positive Change for Marine Life. So a female charity in the Solomon Islands, and they are literally changing their community through composting. So to answer your question, you might come in on a coffee cup, you might come in on a children's lunchbox, or it could be composting, but you're there for a reason.
I love it. I thought you were going to say it's because it's Met Monday today, not Compost Week, unfortunately. Okay, talk to me about customer experience at Seed and Sprout. These customers have high value reasons that they're shopping there. If you look at the, consumer psychology pyramid, they're doing that for a lot of self-actualization reasons. If they're thinking about, that top end of why they're wanting to buy sustainable products, what does good from a CX perspective look like to you in real terms?
Yeah, I think we could probably answer this in all the right ways. So reducing the friction, making sure that the website is running really fast and it's easy to find things and the checkout's easy. I think you being a CX professional, it's a top 10 list, right? So I'm very fortunate to have a very talented team that's been ticking through the fundamentals. But for us, it goes much deeper. It's about the education process. So I think what some of our competitors don't do particularly well is they don't spend the time on the education. So we're in the business of change. We're trying to change the world to be a better place. We're trying to help people be healthier. And changing habits is really, really hard. So our biggest drive in CX is actually education. It's up front at the top of the funnel in brand awareness. and Kate and our team's been working really, really hard on that post-purchase. Why did you buy this product? How do you use this product? How does it positively impact your life and the environment? So education's a really big one for us. We had a lot of weird and wacky questions for our customer care team. Big shout out to them. There is nothing that they will not answer. They will chase everybody down in the team to get those questions answered, but I think that makes us a little bit different in the CX space.
Yeah, it definitely does. Customer education is not something we spend a lot of focus on, when I enter into businesses, because it's historically something that's really hard, and it relies on all of those departments working together, and having those silos can be really difficult. You talked before about the brand on its trajectory to that 40 mil at the end of the year. Congratulations, that's huge. But, that journey wasn't always up, and, there was a moment where there was a shift and an unlock to start that growth again. Talk us through, some of those things that were put in place, because, when you're faced with this, oh my gosh, we're going downhill, it's not just one thing, there's lots of cogs that need to turn to get you on the right space.
Absolutely. Anybody who wasn't here a little bit earlier, I entered the business in 2022, and we were probably 6 years into our journey. The first 3 years were massive growth, explosive, 600% year-on-year growth, and then the ensuing sort of 18 months under our previous CEO, for lots of different reasons, just didn't go too well for us. So we're in a turnaround space, but I think the things that really accelerated and turned us around were fixing the fundamentals in the business, of course, and making us much more commercially astute. We had grown so quickly that we just didn't have the fundamentals.
Yeah.
We didn't have position descriptions. We didn't have clear lines of delineation, which is pretty typical. That's the scrappy side of growing a business, I suppose. But we really doubled down on the product, and that took a good 18 months to turn us around. And I'm very, very proud of the efforts of the product team, and that's collaboration. All good ideas come from across the business. Sometimes it's from customers who can't find a solution. And the other key unlock for us, which was scary at the time, I said before we're about to move our warehouse again, I did the RFQ for that. We didn't have a head of warehouse at the time. We had scaled, or we'd leaned down so tight that we were picking and packing for lots of the Black Fridays in the early years, and that gives you an appreciation for all the parts of the business and the roadblocks that they have. But the warehouse move for us, it really did allow us to scale, and again, we're about to make that step again. So really hard and scary the first time. Second time, it's much more comfortable because I've got a lot more talented people around me to be able to facilitate that. But a couple of big unlocks there.
There's probably some brands out there that are quite surprised to hear, oh yeah, we're all packing orders, to be a, $20 to $40 million business, and to know that everyone from the team is still standing there on the shop floor. That makes this really real for me. We're all going through a growth phase, no matter where we are. Now that you are on that side, talk to us about some of the decisions that didn't serve the customer. We want to keep them at the centre of everything we do, and we always say that, and there'll be many times we mention that over this week, but it's hard to do that.
Yeah, it is hard, and I think one of my observations when I first arrived into the business, and it wasn't sight unseen, I knew what I was walking into. It was a very good onboarding process of understanding what we needed to turn around. But I think in the very early days, we had been so obsessed with acquiring customers, and I think this is probably, there'll be some nodding in the room of, we were so obsessed with finding that customer, but we didn't put the same rigour into actually keeping that customer. And so if you're a business that's sort of in that scaling phase of 0 to 5 mil, I think if you haven't had time, really sit down and have a look at what your retention is, because as we just saw in those previous slides, cost of acquisition is only ever going to go up, and if customers are never coming to your website because of AI, we really need to double down and work out what's happening on the other side. And I'm really blessed with the talent that we have on the team to be able to turn that around and really focus on retention, which again sounds like nuts and bolts, but when you're in that scaling phase, it's really hard to stop. And really dig into, okay, well, how many of these customers are coming back? And I think in the early days, it was not just that we didn't have a very robust retention strategy. I think it was also product related. We had a lot of products that were just a one-time buy.
Yep.
that's a really hard business to run.
Yes, absolutely. And we know that we're meant to do these things, right? You know, you're meant to sit down, have a QBR, review that strategy, you know, review that peak period, but finding the time for that is really challenging. It's always this project to the next project to the next project to the next project. So before we jump to questions, talk to me about a project. What is something that you are working on at the moment that's going to shift the needle for your customer experience?
We are back in system and process land pretty deeply. So we have a new CCO that has joined us who actually worked for us in the early days as a GM. So we're very lucky to have Maddie come back and join the team. We have lots of talent across our team, lots of people that have joined us in the last little while and some staff members from the original days. But we are really doubling down on how our systems talk to each other. So once we're expanding into different channels like wholesale and international markets, the plumbing's pretty stuffed at the moment, to be honest. With the systems that we were on as that sort of, $20 million business, it's okay, but it's really under a lot of strain at the moment. So we have long-standing partners. We're also really looking into AI and how that can work for the team and remove some of those things that maybe aren't value add. But systems and processes for us are pretty gnarly. So I'm speaking to quite a few vendors at the conference, but that's really the big project we're working on at the moment.
Yeah, there's like a real nice correlation between that employee satisfaction and that customer satisfaction and how those two things can really blend their way together. Now I'm going to throw to the floor for some questions. There will also be a little QR code that pops up on the screen to connect to the Seed and Sprout website. The team has lovingly popped through a discount code for you to lovingly purchase from them as a little treat from Retail Fest. So, do we have any questions? There are little treats, like I mentioned, and we love a little treat as we're busily scanning the QR codes. Anyone with a question? Yes?
So the brand started with lunch boxes. I'm curious to know how long before you decided to diversify and how the next product range came about.
Amazing. So the question for anyone that couldn't hear is that the Seed and Sprout team started with lunch boxes, and when was that moment that they decided to diversify into other product ranges, and is there a right time to do that?
Very, very good question. I wasn't in the business at the time, but so the storytelling goes really quite quickly. So Sophie's here, she's an incredible entrepreneur and always tinkering and thinking about what that next product is. So it was quite quick, that expansion from the original, and I think the benefit of having that excruciating product development process and knowing that sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes it takes 3 years. My advice would be, if you are starting a single product business, rethink that strategy because it's really, really hard in the market, and I think you're always going to have consumables or complementary products or at least the ability to extend your range. We spend a lot of time on product strategy because it can be a long and hard wheel to turn. So my advice would be to think about it really early in the piece.
Amazing. Do you have any other questions for the afternoon? Yeah?
You're going to have some new figures that are different to the rest of us then, like ROES, return on education spend, perhaps?
I like that.
What sort of numbers fit around you talking about holding on to existing customers so you don't have to pay that acquisition cost again? Is there a level there? Is there a percentage? Can you give us a real live example of that, perhaps?
So the question was around numbers, figures, and what metrics we're looking at. So ROES, return on education spend, is a new one that I really love. So the question was for Beck around some real figures and some real things you're looking at to move the needle.
Excellent question, and the team will witness now that we will now start measuring ROES. Excellent, thank you very much. Yeah, I am an old school data nerd, so my background is in marketing, spent a lot of time in product, so we look at a lot of metrics, and I think maybe the reason why a lot of brands don't invest in education is it is hard to measure exactly where it is. We do brand health studies. I'm very fortunate to have worked with very talented people across my corporate career and got some cheap deals on brand health. So we track awareness and consideration and repurchase as well. But I think for the team, and it's hard for me to hand over the mic for them at the moment, but we look at that in terms of engagement. So we're a really prolific brand on social media. Sophie Kovic has her own presence on social, so have a look at Soph. She's particularly big on TikTok, but we know that when we put out a program around compost awareness, we send out a guide, and they get downloaded like crazy. And so how many people actually consume all the materials, I'm not sure, but we know whenever we put a guide out, it really hits the mark. And our customers are pretty vocal about what they want to hear from us
Yeah.
and what they want to see. So yeah, it's a good one, a hard one to measure, but I would say we get it in the social engagement that we get.
Can I have a small question?
Sure.
Do you have a community? Do you have I think last year we talked about a lot of communities exist where they love your brand for you. Do you have a community for Sip and Sprout?
Yeah, the question was whether we have a community officially, and we don't. It's something that we've talked about. I've been in brands before where you have a closed Facebook group, and I think the challenge for us is that our demographic really spans so many generations now. It really started with millennial parents. Now it's the boomers, and then it's also now the young kids. I'm not even sure what that generation is now,
Who
but
knows?
the young kids, once they've made it, they've got a Seed and Sprout item in their home. So we actually still do that through social channels. So Pinterest, we have a really good community. We have a great community on Facebook and Instagram, and we're quite prolific there. But yeah, it's not technically a community like some other brands might have, where you're all in a group somewhere. So.
Amazing. Please put your hands together and thank Beck.